Welcome to Kali Tribune podcast. Oftentimes in these podcasts and essays, we address the problem I dub system thinking, or the principle of system, as a problem in a very deep and prevalent sense that is nevertheless almost unrecognized by people who indulge in attempts to explain sometimes social phenomena, cultural phenomena, but what is most important for me, the principles that used to be the subject of philosophy, theology, and such sciences. Where system thinking, in my opinion, is complete taboo and should be complete taboo. Something I had explained in detail in various other places, but some of those explanations, for the sake of discussion, I'll reiterate here. Now, in this podcast, we'll have a look about phenomenon of internet itself and internet-based ideas, as I would like to call them. I would not call them memes, but ideas. The complexes of let's say, explanations of the current events that attempt to be founded on something substantial. That is to say, that are not just observations, but interpretations of, let's say, facts through some principle. Now, this course of making an explanation or trying to explicate something is formally correct. You have to have one underlying principle, or better to say, one unifying principle in trying to explain something. But problem with system thinking is that system thinking is a kind of image of the original activity of thinking. It is not, in my opinion, original activity at all. And being such, it can very easily be, almost imperceptibly, used as a cuckoo's egg. That is to say, it can take place of the proper mode of thinking, because it's so similar to it in its form. And form here, the term I use has to be qualified, because original meaning of the term form is almost opposite of how we understand it today and how it's been understood in modernity, especially from Kant onwards, because the term formality in Kant has very definite modern meaning that is, I would say, complete opposite, for instance, from the scholastic understanding of the form, even in its moral aspect, because originally everything had a moral aspect, everything you think and everything you say. Not so today. Now, somebody put a few remarks in a comment sections on my latest podcast about internet devised and internet-based terms like those red pills, blue pills, black pills, and such. And what do I make of it? I think that those terms are very good introduction to a subject, because they are the final expression of the process that is not obvious at first sight. And from this final expression, we can go back towards the origin, which is a proper procedure, because origin is never clearly seen at the beginning. You have to come to it. Something, by the way, which is complete opposite of system thinking. Now, these terms come, as I understand, from the science fiction film from the 90s, The Matrix, and as such are of very recent origin, because their historical invention doesn't really deserve to be called historical. It's 20-something years, I think, that movie came out. It is not a philosophically pregnant movie. It's a science fiction movie, although popular culture and especially popular audiovisual art, moving pictures, moving images as movies, series, and so on, are the best vehicle for delivering propaganda, or delivering, if we are not to qualify politically the message, delivering messages that have mass appeal. Certainly you won't deliver a message with intent of mass appeal through classical music or any other form of high art, as movies are mostly not high art, precisely in the sense that they have this mass appeal because of the ease with which they are consumed. They don't require great effort from the recipient. It is no wonder that then we have to sometimes to say something about it. Now, this is in itself quite damning for these terms. They, as I understand, mostly are used to indicate the attitude one gets towards quote-unquote burning questions of our day. So if one takes a red pill, one awakens to the desert of the real, that is to say, the true situation in which we live. Assumption being that he was asleep before. Blue pill, if I recall it correctly, is when you decide to continue living in your delusion, continue sleeping and maybe having good dreams. And then there's a black pill, and I think this one is invention of these internet-based political rightist. How would I define this? For political rightist ecosystem, internet ecosystem, because I shun using traditional monikers as political groups or intellectual groups, because they are really not that, I think, and that's precisely the thing I'll try to demonstrate here. So taking black pill means giving up on everything, being cynical, pessimist, and so on and so forth. And I noticed since I started using internet that all of those things were not around at that time in this form, that this is the people very quickly start using these terms as something that is completely given, self-explanatory. And this is I think, the clear sign of system thinking at hand. Namely, that is to say, the perils of system thinking, the distortive and corrosive influence of it. Because people use these terms that have no relation to historical reality before a reception of a Hollywood movie, to that historical reality. So, for instance, to paraphrase, I don't know, that it's nothing strange to say that, for instance, Cyril of Alexandria, the church father, was red-pilled because I don't know, he was authoritarian in the prosecution of his office, and he had this reputation of ruthlessness, and so on and so forth. Not the thing why he is venerated as saint now, but this was Cyril, for instance, was generally understood as such in a modern historiography of the church fathers. To take one example, the other example could be, I don't know, some Roman emperor who kind of, for instance, or not only Roman emperor, but maybe a Roman senator who was against giving Roman citizenship to just anybody, because obviously he was against immigration. Now, these two examples tell us something about both system thinking and about these buzzwords. The thing is that you cannot really apply them to these people. You can, that is to say, you can apply them to the image you have of these historical figures. And this image is in fact your own image projected into them. Not of you personally, but your own understanding of everything that is present. The sure sign of the existence and activity of system thinking is transposition of present into past. And the present that is necessarily stemming from one's own experience of himself. Systems are ultimate subjective constructs. What I find fascinating is that even, and maybe for the most part precisely in academic world, this is not recognized. So the system is a series of inferences, or is a body of knowledge that is unified on a principle. And the principle that unifies this knowledge is I, the ego. I talked a lot about this, so I tried to skip metaphysics. But we could also call it self. Because to have knowledge means to have unified knowledge. With the advent of system thinking in modern age, I won't take one philosopher as an example. They are serious. This was the process, the relatively long process that brought this about. But a very clear expression you have in Kant, who took that unified knowledge has to be unified by what he called transcendental apperception. Transcendental apperception is the fact, not the concept, but fact, that all my representations, all thinking and so on, is thinking from me, of me. No, I'm sorry, language barrier. Everything is being followed and perceived. Again, not a really appropriate term. Everything is being displayed before this transcendental apperception, before its quote-unquote eyes. So the I, not my I or your I or anybody's I, but I in itself is the principal I that is present in every thinking being, is what gives us a unity of knowledge. And this comes from the fact that no matter how people try to reject metaphysics, all thinking is metaphysical in the end. And metaphysics is based on on the fact of being. That is to say, the unity, the original one that is present in all. And in traditional sense, this one was not understood as I. It was understood as a reality in itself that encompasses both I and not I. That is to say, the very split between I and not I does not come into play. That's a modern thing. That's something you have with people like Descartes and Kant and others. And so people like Kant, who said, for instance, that being is not a real predicate, just make an inversion. He denies that we can have the knowledge of this one in all, and then just puts one in all in our subjective faculties. Because this transcendental apperception of which Kant speaks retains all qualities that being was traditionally endowed with, but rejects being itself. So he comes to the question that it is an infinite scandal of philosophy that we cannot prove the existence in a satisfactory way, the existence of the outside world. And please don't laugh about it, because this is a serious thing, because once you take this position, this really becomes a problem. And now for those who laugh, Let's get back to our own day and age and internet. The very problem with all these black pills, red pills, and so on and so forth, and all those kind of like teachings on internet and political groups, intellectual groups, is their attempt to come to grips with reality, to touch the reality, in fact, because they are certainly not living in it. Their constructs are clearly and conclusively expressions of the selves, of their eyes, and of which is indicated by the absolute present of what they do, because we all understand ourselves primarily in present, but normal human being, a normal human mind, to be more precise, will not project this present in the past. That is to say, he will project it to an extent and then try to purify this by critically examining is he justified in this, because he's not. These people, let's say, don't do this at all. Not because they lack critical faculties, but because they are doing something completely different. They are living on the plane where past does not exist. That is to say, internet is an expression of complete system of systems. And hence, the virtual reality would mean, and I would use this term because, with this qualification, because virtuality originally meant quite the opposite of what it means now. Virtual reality would be system reality. And the whole point of everything done on internet, if it is conceived on internet, if it is not using internet as merely a media, because among other things, internet is medium, but it is far more than just medium, is to conform not to reality outside internet, but to conform reality outside internet to it. And this is why I don't make a sharp distinction between somebody as white nationalist or alt-right and SJWs, wokes, and so on and so forth. This is not because I am avoiding fights, as some people would mean, and not taking any of those pills they recommend, red, blue, green, or whatever. But because the essence that drives them to do what they do is the same. It has the same nature. And in itself, it would not mean that this is the sufficient reason not to take sides. But in this sense, this essence is something that I consider to be completely destructive to thought in itself and to reality in itself. Or better to say, our grasp with reality, and cannot be admitted as something that can be at least for a time entertained and thought of and used. You use part of it, reject the other part. No. Because the very nature of system thinking, as I just outlined and sketched it, is such that it has to be absolutely accepted. And this is why you see, for instance, in these internet groups, when they start to splinter, as originally ideological groups tended to do, especially on the left, they splinter along the small details that are not in concordance with the total system. Problem is that everybody, every individual is a total system and has a warranty to create a total system, because the principle, unifying principle of the system is I. It is one. Yet at the same time it is multiple, because by definition there is not only one I, but every I seeks to be the only one. And I think you see the problem here. And you can observe this in for instance, alt-right and such movements that splintered. Those movements in reality used to splinter in the past, when you have these ideologically driven groups whose ideology is very well defined. So, especially when they win, they start to come in conflict because there has to be a party line. However, this is something much worse. These are not political movements at all. That's what I think. These are expressions of pathology. And pathology that is shared by most people now, that is certainly shared by the creators of accepted cultural debate or cultural atmosphere. One only has to take a look at what happens in England, at least from what one can see from media, with this move to create medieval or ancient England that was populated by African blacks that were kings or queens and so on and so forth. This is the clear expression of this absolute system thinking of the particular brand that is opposed by the other brand of also system thinking. My idea is that this can be opposed only but not by not engaging the system thinking at all, by not creating systems, but by relying to reality. However, it's a problem concretely England. And Anglo-Saxon culture has, for me, quite mysterious affinity for this kind of thinking. People usually blame it on Germans from their deeper metaphysical grasp and attempt to really go into the roots of things and plant the demon seed there. There is some merit in this argument, but German culture is not world dominant. Anglo-Saxon, not really culture, but pop culture is. And for some reason, people seem to be prone to this, especially because there is this proclivity to affirm the empiricism, what I call facts and logic, but facts are very wanting in this empiricist kind of thinking, because it relies on fact as a metaphysical given, as what is in fact the real translation of the word fact, but without the giver. And they are not so much empiricists. Historically, were not so much into empirical research, but in proving that the one that unifies all is the physical thing. That being is a great physical thing. This is called sometimes physicalism, and they are very, very prone to invent isms. And isms are the clear sign of the thought that is petrified, that is systematized, because it doesn't move further. Once you call something ism, you are entrenching it as a political and combative, in fact, position. So you have idealism, materialism. You have to ask yourself, where were these terms before 18th century? They were not used. At least I don't know that they were used. But if somebody used them, it was not the way that it was prevalently used. Plato was no idealist. Aristotle was no realist, and so on and so forth. And to give another example, which will be conclusion of this podcast about this system thinking in various modes of living of today, I would turn to academic atmosphere. Let's call it. I apologize, but I always try to evade the terms that are not adequate. Discourse would be adequate term, but whenever I hear this word, I know it comes from Foucault. When you hear somebody talk about the academic discourse, and I reject Foucault wholesale, so I must. I am, for the time being, prevented of leisurely using normal term, proper term for proper thing, and this is also kind of telltale sign of the infection that this system thinking, that is to say, this kind of inversion of reality, to what extent it took hold. Now, in academia, in science, in philosophy, and such sciences, system thinking seems to be at home, because people believe, obviously, that they are dealing with systems of concepts. Now, I have to stress this very clearly. When you read about somebody writing a book on Thomas Aquinas or Duns Scotus or any Plato or anybody, Aristotle, and starts talking about system, the Aristotle system, Thomas system, that man, with all his PhDs and all accolades he can have, or intelligence, that is to say, a power of judgment he has, has failed completely, because he failed the first test. None of these thinkers possesses a system. There is no system there. Therefore, the word must not be used. This must, I will qualify. This doesn't mean that one should do the things the things precisely the thing the system makers and postmoderns do, is to rape the language, and then through the guise of liberating language, starting to purify it to your own liking, so that you must not use this word. This is to be qualified, because when you use this word, you have to be aware what you are talking about. So if you are talking about the system of Thomas Aquinas, you have to be aware that you are not talking about system really, but you are using closest analogy to the body of knowledge expressed therein, because this knowledge is not system, because it is not unified on ego principle. There is no division between subject and object whatsoever in his thought. Problem is that this fact is not so obvious, and if you hold the idea that it is a system, to a very large extent you'll feel justified, because you'll be able to project your own logic on him, and because you will be projecting not images like the people project black race on white medieval kings and queens, or Renaissance kings and queens. When you project modern logic on traditional logic, the difference is quite difficult to discern. Don't you think? We are not talking about things that are visible. We are talking about invisible things. But the effect is nevertheless the same. So I won't go into names now, but I read some theologians, some articles and reviews of books. One who came to believe that apokatastasis is the real Christian teaching, apokatastasis being the heretical doctrine, considered to be heretical by most, if not all. That everybody, not only everybody will be saved, but in the restoration of the world to its original state of not being fallen world, even devil will be pardoned for being such an asshole for whole aeons, and will be reinstated in the ranks of angels again. I won't go into this idea, but I'll just give you how he justifies writing a book about it. He said something along the lines: if the God, a God who created finite being, would be capable of eternally punishing this finite being for all eternity, this God would not be coherent. Also, Christianity, in which, and this is not the God I would be able to believe in. Now, this is a man who is not Christian. and he is not alone in this. What I'm saying now is very radical. This is something you can apply even to people like that are considered the great Christian thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard and others. But the thing is, this position of his position is from I towards outside. So I expect this to be justified for this or that reasons. So he is doing a theodicy, the justification of God. And theodicy, in my opinion, is not the quality, not the form of theological investigation or philosophical investigation you will find in pre-modern times. Because they were not justifying. The assumption, the perception of truth was completely different. Although it is very similar in expressions, in verbal, superficial expressions, but is in fact worlds apart. And you see how worlds apart are they when somebody makes these radical conclusions. Because you could know this man, you could probably know him as a very educated, great professor, or so on and so forth, and then he comes with something like this. And in Christianity, there is one thing about losing your faith, of not accepting God anymore, not believing in God or something like that, or to that effect. Origen said something very very indicative. He said at one place, as he was asked to write an apology against Celsus, Platonist, let's say, philosopher who was attacking Christians, and Origen in introduction says something along the lines, I don't know anybody who was convinced by arguments to lose the faith. You lose faith because of persecution and because of your sins. Now think about it. You have a man who will lose faith if God does not conform to his intellectual assumptions, his own intellectual assumptions, mind you, that are projected as universal, because he is working on assumption that is probably unconscious of the existence of this pure intellect, pure mind, human mind that has in it these axiomata and presuppositions that reality has to conform to in order to be real, good, beautiful, and blah, 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 blah. Now, when you read Thomas Aquinas or somebody like that, when you come to the matter of transcendentals, you see, for instance, that for Thomas, the truth is a requisite for something to exist, not the other way around. It is interchangeable, it's transcendental. But he doesn't say this from arguing from he's not arguing at all for it. This is very important. That's why people don't sometimes miss this aspect, which is in fact the source of light that makes all other things he says luminous. The thing is that he is not this kind of thinking or kind of projecting your own mind into reality is completely alien to him. This doesn't exist then. And this modern guy, contemporary, is in fact completely. He's not. First of all, he has no faith in a. He's a theologian of a certain denomination, and he certainly has no faith because this is not the way you can lose faith. Now, I'm not trying to sermonize here. I always avoid this, but faith is a good example of this, because faith is something that doesn't come about in systems. It cannot not because it is the non-systemic state, deep human emotion, because it is not. The faith is the outside influence that it is infused in man, or that man's whole disposition is enlightened by, but it comes from the outside source. It's not, man is not its source. And you never have full understanding of it. This is the clear sign. And for instance, people like medieval theologians and such, and saints, when they talked about being, if they ever talked about such philosophical, metaphysical matters, some did, like Aquinas, for instance, they presupposed the things like fate and so on to be real, and that reality, when you talk about reality, they have to be understood. Reality has to be understood in terms of accommodating for them, because they were reality for them, as they are not, as fate is not reality for this guy, a modern theologian I was talking about. Because this is something I noticed with people who are converting to religion. I already talked about this, changing their religion very easily and so on and so forth, because they are not religious at all. It's not that they are misrepresenting some religion or that they chose the wrong religion and that there is no choice in religion. There is, but they are not religious at all. They are exchanging these positions, system positioning. This is what they are doing. Excuse me. And this is, I think, one prescient example, because people grasped to these theologians, philosophers, whatnot. But when you see something like this, the whole of this body of lectures, of books, and so on, it's completely worthless. It's not word paper on which it is written. And there are really fine scholars, there are people. What I'm talking about now, in this precise sense of these academic system projections, is not something I am pulling out of my own head. I read scholars who notice this, scholars who you won't hear about on internet, because if you want to read a book of some medievalist who understands these things, you're gonna need maybe to learn foreign language, if the English is your native or only foreign language. Chances are maybe you won't find it in English at all. Be ready to learn language to read a book and such things. It's not easy, but I mean it's not easy to come by. Truth is not easy to come by. And to conclude, on internet, the idea that the whole world of knowledge is at our fingertips is an illusion. It is not. Because knowledge cannot come from fingertips and from looking at screens. Also political change and such things. So that would be a small rant about systems, internet, black pills, red pills, blue pills, pink pills, and whatnot. Thank you for your attention. This was Branko Malic of Kali Tribune, signing out.